Chapter 1. Bobbi Weston glared at her husband of almost 35 years. I know we agreed to keep traveling the country in our RV, but do you realize I have 3 grandbabies here with more on the way? How can I leave my precious babies? Wilbur shook his head. We've done our time with children and on the ranch. I love it here as much as you do, but I don't want the kids to think they can come running to us every time there's a little problem with the ranch. We raised 6 kids. We can be grandparents a couple of weekends a year. She sighed. I thought I could live with that plan, but I really can't. I need to be with them. I want them to know me. How could he not understand how much those grandbabies meant to her? After 34 years of raising children, don't you think we deserve a break? Of course we do, but we've taken one. We've been gone for over a year. Now that we're back, I want to stay. I want to be with my grandchildren. The twins are so precious, and they're getting excited when they see me now. How can you possibly want to leave? How can you not? This is what we've been working for our entire lives. Bobbi sighed. I know that's what we said, but that was before the grandbabies. Wilbur shook his head, walking toward the door of the cabin. I've got a quick meeting with Pastor Kevin. We'll stay through the vow renewal at the end of the month, but then I'm done. I need my freedom. After the door closed behind her husband, Bobbi sank into a chair, wondering why she'd married the man in the first place. He was bossy, annoying, and absolutely impossible. Even as the thought crossed her mind, she thought of her first moments on the ranch. This place was in her blood as much as it was in his. She'd been only 18 and already on her own. After her father had killed her mother in a fit of jealous rage when she was 8, she'd bounced from foster home to foster home. Immediately after her high school graduation, she packed the few clothes she had into her backpack and started walking with no destination in mind. She'd worked a couple of short-term jobs, taken a few buses from place to place, and she'd been ready for adventure. The first thing she'd done after getting to the ranch was go to lunch at Kelsey's Cafe, grinning at the alliteration caused by the creative spelling. She sat down for lunch and counted the money she had left, which was less than $5. Frowning down at the menu, she chose a bowl of soup and a glass of water. Hopefully she'd have a job before she needed to eat again. She could sleep in the woods since it was summertime, but food was necessary for life. A woman in her late 40s stopped at her table. What can I get for you today? Soup of the day and a glass of water, please. The woman frowned at her. You're too skinny as it is. You need to eat a real meal. She called back toward the kitchen. Get me today's special and a bowl of soup. Bobbi's jaw dropped. I can't afford that. What kind of waitress wouldn't let her have what she wanted to eat, anyway? It's on the house. If you're that worried about it, you can wash some dishes this afternoon. I'll wash dishes, then. Bobbi wasn't about to take handouts from anyone. Her last foster mother had made it clear that she was a burden, and they'd only taken her in because of the money the state paid them for her. She wasn't going to be a burden on anyone else for as long as she lived. Suit yourself. The older woman walked away, coming back a minute later with a big bowl of soup and a basket of crackers. Get started on that. She stood and watched as Bobbi ate her first bite, nodding with satisfaction. Bobbi decided to ignore her. She obviously thought she was in charge of the place, but if she was, she wouldn't be waiting tables, would she? She pulled a book out of her backpack and opened to the page she'd bookmarked, with a real bookmark. She'd had a friend who had thought dog-earing the pages was just as good as a bookmark, but she'd been very wrong. The woman stood and watched her eat and read for a minute, and then she'd slid into the booth across from her. I'm Kelsey Weston. As in Kelsey from Kelsey's Cafe? Maybe the woman was acting as if she owned the place because she did. The very one. Where are you headed? Bobbi shrugged. I really don't know. She didn't offer more information, because she'd found that no matter how curious people were, they didn't want to hear her story about leaving the foster home. And no one wanted to hear that her father had killed her mother. Who would? Would you consider staying on here for a little while? I can give you a small room in the ranch house, and you can help out here. Bobbi swallowed another bite of the tomato soup. It was delicious. What would you want me to do? Dishes. Bus tables. Kelsey watched her carefully, obviously sizing her up. Bobbi nodded. I can do that. I'll show you to your room after you wash dishes this afternoon, then. Minimum wage, but you get 1 meal a day here in the diner, and you have a room to stay in as long as you're working here. Sounds fair. Bobbi had no idea why the woman wanted her to work there, but she needed the job badly. Another woman stopped at the table. You hire her yet? The woman asked. She seemed about the same age as Kelsey Weston. Yes, Jacqueline, I hired her. She's going to wash dishes and bus tables. Are you happy now? Jacqueline shrugged. The fairies say she's the one. The woman turned and walked away, leaving Bobbi staring after her. Who was that? Bobbi asked. Kelsey sighed. That's my best friend, Jacqueline Hardy. She's in charge of the RV park. She seems a bit odd. Bobbi smiled as she realized the second part of what Kelsey Weston had said. You have an RV park here on the ranch? I've always wanted to have an RV so I could travel around the country. Kelsey smiled. My son, Wilbur, says the same thing. He's not at all pleased that he's in charge of this ranch until his children are old enough to take over. How old are his children? Bobbi asked, wondering about the people who she'd be working for. Oh, he isn't even married yet. That might be the problem. Kelsey stood up and brushed off her apron. I didn't catch your name. Bobbi knew she hadn't thrown it, but since the woman would be her employer, she probably should. I'm Bobbi Jackson. Welcome to Rivers End Ranch, Bobbi. Not everyone who comes here finds what they're looking for, but I have a feeling you will. Kelsey turned and walked away, leaving Bobbi staring after her. What an odd person. Bobbi turned her attention back to her book and her soup. At least the food was good. Bobbi shook her head, walking to the window of the cabin. There was no use in dwelling on the past. She loved the ranch and everything about it, just as much as she'd loved it when she first arrived all those years ago. Kelsey Weston had been the best mother-in-law a woman could ask for, but Jacqueline had been her real mentor. Maybe it was time to pay the old woman a visit. Asterisk. When Bobbi unlatched Jacqueline's gate and stepped into her yard, she wasn't at all surprised that Jacqueline stepped out onto her front porch. The fairies told me you were coming. Do you realize you were my first match? There was something about you that made the fairies start talking to me. Bobbi felt her lips curve up. She'd seen Jacqueline several times since she and Wilbur had come back to the ranch, but she hadn't visited her. How many bunnies do you have this week? 24. Got them all fixed, though, so hopefully there won't be a lot more of them. Jacqueline held her door wide open. Come in. I made tea and snickerdoodles. You still like snickerdoodles, don't you? Bobbi smiled, feeling a sense of déjà vu. She'd been here so many times over the years to visit her mother-in-law's closest friend. After Kelsey's death, she'd kept Bobbi going. Of course, I still like snickerdoodles. Who doesn't? Jacqueline cackled softly. Get in this house. Bobbi stepped inside, pushing a bunny out of her way as she sat down. I see you've matched up all of my children, and you've got years to go before you start on my grandbabies. There are guests and ranch employees. Now that I have the fairies on my side, no match is too difficult. Jacqueline poured tea for the two of them, and Bobbi took a cup. Now, tell me what's really on your mind. You're not really thinking of leaving Wilbur, Are you? If anyone else had asked her that, Bobbi would have been shocked, but Jacqueline had always seemed to have the ability to read her mind. She claimed it was the fairies, of course, but Bobbi wasn't so sure. Leaving him? I don't know. We've been married for almost twice as long as I was alone. What would I do without him? Live here with your grandbabies. Jacqueline put her teacup down with a clatter. Bobbi, Wilbur is the man who you're destined to be with. If you don't stay married to him, you're going to be unhappy. The fairies say you need to work things out. Bobbi frowned. That's just the thing. I don't know if we can work this one out. He never understood that I was attracted to his family as much as I was to him. Having a big family, and being loved, it was so important to me. It still is. He wants me to leave my grandbabies, and I just don't think I can do that. Jacqueline studied her for a moment. Surely two grown adults who have been together for almost 35 years can make compromises. Don't you think? You want me to compromise on my grandchildren? Do you know what you're asking? Your children have been like grandchildren to me. I can't imagine any of them going anywhere. Since Kelsey died, I've been lonelier, and your children have kept me going. When you left, it was like losing my own daughter, so yes, I do know what I'm asking. Jacqueline leaned forward and took Bobbi's hand in a firm grip. I also know you and Wilbur are meant to be together. Nothing should keep you apart. Bobbi frowned. She knew that Jacqueline had lost her only love many years before. And you're sure the fairies are never wrong? Bobbi didn't believe in the fairies, exactly. She did believe in Jacqueline, though. They didn't start talking to me until right before you arrived on the ranch, you know. You were the catalyst. You have to know how much it means to me that the two of you work things out. I guess you could come here and talk to me with him, like a marriage counselor. Bobbi blanched at the very idea. I think we'll be fine without going to those extremes. I'm willing if you need me. I really appreciate it. Bobbi got to her feet before she found herself consenting to something no sane human being would ever agree to. I'm going to head over to Kelsey's. I want to play with my grandbabies. Willow and Tori need grandma kisses to grow, you know. Jacqueline waved her away. Just remember the offer stands. Bobbi said a silent prayer she would never be that desperate. She'd rather stick a fork in her own eye than go to Jacqueline for counseling. Maybe Pastor Kevin could help, though. With a wave, she headed out the door. As she walked, she thought back again to her first day on the ranch. She spent the afternoon washing dishes as she'd promised, but after the cafe closed, she walked with Mrs. Weston over to the main ranch house. My family lives here, but we have a room you can use, the older woman explained. You want me to live with your family? Bobbi had asked, her eyes wide. Are you sure? Are you a drug addict or a mass murderer? Will you rob us blind? Well, no, but my father murdered someone. Mrs. Weston stopped walking for a moment, looking Bobbi up and down. I don't believe the sins of the fathers should be taken out on the child. Do you? Well, no. But they have been. How so? Bobbi sighed, wondering just how much she should reveal to this woman. Her entire life people had looked at her oddly because they knew the truth about her. Finally, she decided she shouldn't hide it. This woman was being kind enough to offer her a job and a place to stay. She owed it to her. My father killed my mother in a drunken fit when I was 8. He went to jail, and I've spent my life in foster homes. I left the day I graduated. How long ago was that? Only about a month. Mrs. Weston frowned. You've been on your own for a month? Where have you lived? Bobbi shrugged. Here and there. I have worked for long enough to travel. I want to see all the states. I'd never left Oklahoma before, and now I've been to Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Idaho. She looked around her at the mountains and the beautiful land. I think Idaho is the most beautiful of them all. It's also the coldest. You need to be settled before winter, my young nomadic friend. Mrs. Weston wrapped her arm around Bobby's shoulders and began walking toward the house again. You don't want me to leave? Mrs. Weston laughed. Of course, I don't. My friend, Jacqueline, says that you're meant to be here. The crazy woman who said something about fairies at lunchtime? That very one. She's been a true friend to me. She would have married my brother, but he died in the line of duty. He was a police officer. Bobby frowned. I'm so sorry. It's been a very long time, my dear. Mrs. Weston shook her head. I declare that the rest of the evening is for talking about happy things. Nothing negative. That sounds good to me. While you settle into your room, I will make a feast. My husband and son work many hours and they're famished when they finally arrive home at the end of a long day. What do they do? Bobby asked. Although she'd grown up in Oklahoma, she knew nothing about ranching. She'd spent her entire life in a small city. Kelsey Weston smiled. Why, they run the ranch, of course. I have 3 other sons as well, but they're married and no longer live on the ranch. I thought my children would run the place together someday, but it doesn't seem to be happening. And what do you do? The cafe is mine. I've always wanted to have my own place, and I opened it after the children were grown. That's why I can just hire you without talking to anyone. It's completely my domain, even though it's on the ranch. Mrs. Weston stopped in front of a large ranch house. I raised my children here. Don't you think this is a beautiful place to raise children? Bobby nodded uncertainly. She had no idea what a good place to raise children would be. I believe it would be. Mrs. Weston led Bobby to a room around the corner and opened the door. This is our guest room. I hope you'll enjoy staying here. Then she was gone. Bobby bit her lip, looking around the pink-flowered room. It wasn't exactly what she'd have chosen for herself, but it wasn't awful. And it was a free room. She couldn't forget that. She'd slept outside too many nights since leaving Oklahoma. Tonight, she'd sleep in a soft bed under a roof. She couldn't let herself complain about that. Asterisk. After napping for an hour, Bobby felt a lot better. She was still exhausted from the long bus ride up from Salt Lake City, but she was determined not to let it show. She was starting a new life here at the ranch, and she was going to be happy. A knock at her door startled her, but she hurried over and opened it wide. On the other side stood a man in his mid-20s. He had dark hair and the most piercing ice blue eyes she'd ever seen. She felt like she could drown in them. May I help you? The man seemed just as startled to see her as she was to see him. She didn't know how that was possible though, because he'd obviously been sent to fetch her. Surely someone had told him who she was. Hi. I'm Wilbur. My mother told me to bring you to dinner. Wilbur? Like the pig in Charlotte's Web? She did her best not to giggle. It wasn't polite to laugh at someone else's name. Wilbur sighed. Pathetic, isn't it? It's been the tradition in my family to give all boys W names for generations. Really? Not the girls? He shook his head, offering her his arm. May I escort you into the dining room for dinner, milady? She giggled. Maybe you should just call me Bobby. I'm the hired help around here. Nothing more. I don't know about that. You're the first person who's worked for the ranch Mom has invited to live here. Really? She acted like it was something she did every day. Wilbur frowned. Not at all. She said something about Jacqueline liking you and needing you to stay. I met her. She's odd. He laughed. She is. She's been Mom's best friend since before she married Dad, though. She's pretty awesome. If you say so. They got to the table and Mrs. Weston motioned for Bobbi to sit down. We're not formal around here. It's hard to have manners when you spend your days taking care of animals and guests. Bobbi realized she was sitting beside Wilbur, and she smiled at him. I like your ranch. Well, what I've seen of it. Tomorrow's Sunday and the diner is closed. Wilbur, after church, you need to take her on a hike. The mountains are so beautiful this time of year. She needs to see our home in all its glory. Mrs. Weston sat in a chair and handed a bowl of mashed potatoes to Bobbi. Bobbi noticed an older man at the other end of the table then. He must be Mr. Weston. Oh, Wilbur shouldn't have to spend his day off showing me around. I can hike up there myself. Mrs. Weston shook her head. No, there are bears and moose running around here. You need to be safe. No Bigfoot? Someone promised me I'd find Bigfoot in Idaho, Bobbi said, her eyes twinkling. Wilbur grinned. I'm willing to look for him if you are. Sounds good to me. I wonder if he's friends with Jacqueline's fairies. She wanted to giggle at the idea, but she was afraid the others would be offended. Does Jacqueline have any gnomes? I wonder if they'd ward off the fairies. I think we'll need to get her one. And I'm going to love spending my day off with you. I have a feeling you're going to make me laugh. Bobbi looked at him and smiled. Humor had been what she'd fallen back on every day since her mother had died. If she could make people laugh, at least they wouldn't assume she was a killer too. It wasn't easy when the whole town knew your father killed your mother in a jealous rage. Bobbi sighed, picking up the pace as she walked back to the cabin she was sharing with her husband to get her car. She would drive into Riston and see Kelsey and the twins. She'd had 6 children, and only the 2 youngest, twins, had been girls. She'd wanted a house full of girls. Didn't the man determine the sex of the baby? Something else to be mad at Wilbur for. She was keeping count. Who would have thought that after 35 years together she'd be so frustrated with him? He'd seemed like such a charmer at first. And when the children had started coming, she'd thought her world would always be a perfect, idyllic place. How could she have been so wrong? Unlocking the car door, she drove toward Riston, happy to be able to think about her grandbabies, and anything but her husband. Chapter 2. Sitting in Kelsey's living room with her and the grandbabies, Bobbi felt as if she was finally in her element. She snuggled baby Willow close, kissing her cheek softly. Have I told you yet how glad I am you didn't name this sweet baby Widget? Kelsey grinned. It was just a thought. She looked down at Tori, sleeping in her arms. I'm always surprised when she finally sleeps, because she wiggles so much, it seems that she never will. I understand. You were the same. Do you ever wish you'd had identical twins like you and Danny? Kelsey shook her head. No way. I'm not sure how you put up with us. We hated looking alike so much, we'd do anything to look different. And I mean anything. There were days when Danny would smudge dirt on her face, just so we wouldn't look identical. She kissed the sleeping baby in her arms. I wouldn't wish that on my 2 girlies for anything. I still have a hard time believing my youngest child was not only the first to give me grandbabies, but she doubled up the first time. As she said it, Bobbi wondered how her mother would have reacted to her own grandchildren, feeling sad that she'd never find out. For some reason, she'd started thinking about her mother more in the past few months. I was always ahead of my time. Besides, Ellie and Will are expecting, and so are Belinda and Wyatt. Pretty soon you're going to be drowning in grandbabies. Bobbi smiled. Nothing would make me happier, you know. She looked toward the window with a frown. Mom, what's wrong? I've never seen you look quite so morose. Just trying to make some big decisions. Nothing for you to trouble yourself with. Kelsey frowned at that. I'm a pretty good listener. I know you are. You were the only one who listened to my Bigfoot theories and made them your own. Bobbi refused to let her time with her children and grandchildren be touched by sadness. No, she was going to make the most of every day. A short while later, she headed back to the ranch. How was she going to be able to leave Weston and Rivers End Ranch again? The first time had been a necessity. They'd needed to make sure the kids were up for what they were taking on. An operation as big as the ranch was too much for most people. Their kids had made them proud, though. She parked at the cabin before taking off into the woods. She needed to walk and think. Again, her mind went back the 35 years to 1982 when she was a new employee of the ranch, not a family member. Bobbi had gone to church her first Sunday on the ranch, and she'd truly enjoyed it. The pastor in Weston had preached as if he knew people were real and not puppets, determined to do what they felt was right. He seemed to understand the struggles of being a teenager in the 20th century. It was so different than her church in Oklahoma, where everyone was expected to be perfect in every way. After the service, Wilber had taken her hand and helped her up into his big pickup truck. There was a picnic basket in the middle of the big front seat. I brought lunch. Do you ride? Bobbi shook her head. I never had the opportunity to learn, though it's something I've always wanted to do. We'll take the ATVs then. What's an ATV? Wilber turned his head to look at her as he stopped at a stop sign. Where are you from? Mars? He shook his head. An ATV has 3 wheels, and it's a small motorized vehicle. It stands for all-terrain vehicle. We can take a couple of ATVs up into the mountains. The view is unimaginable. Are they hard to drive? She asked. Well, you drive a car, don't you? She shook her head. My foster parents didn't think it was a skill that I needed. Of course, it is. I'll teach you myself. He frowned. That makes it hard to take 2 ATVs up into the mountains, though. You'll have to share mine. Couldn't we just go for a walk? She'd never been anywhere alone with a man. The foster parents she'd lived with since she was 10 were religious nuts. They didn't think young people should date at all. She was surprised they hadn't made her wear a nun's habit. Over the time she'd been gone, she'd slowly started buying new clothes for herself, and she now dressed like most teens, though her clothes had been purchased in second-hand stores. At least she no longer felt conspicuous. He frowned. I guess we can. We won't be able to go as far up into the mountains, though. The view won't be quite as special. She sighed. I do like nice views. Thinking for a moment, she realized she no longer had to obey the strict rules she'd lived by for the past 8 years. I can share an ATV with you. He grinned. He sighed. We'll get him a collar and a leash and he can come along. He got back into the truck and started it, making a U-turn in the middle of the road. Let's go talk to Mom. When they got to the house, Bobbi carried the dog in her arms. They found Kelsey and Jacqueline sitting together in the living room, chattering away. They were obviously very close. Kelsey looked up and saw Bobbi with the dog in her arms. Where'd you get him? We were going to go on an ATV up into the mountains, but the car in front of us slowed down and pushed him out. I couldn't let him get hit by a car. Kelsey sighed. I guess you want to keep him here. I told her I'd keep him at the cabin if you won't let her. Wilber put his hand on Bobbi's shoulder, and she felt a tingle spread through her body. He really made her feel special. You can keep him. Kelsey shook her head, her gaze meeting Jacqueline's. Do you see the sacrifices I make for you and your fairies? Bobbi wanted to squeal and jump up and down. Thank you so much. I'll take good care of him. I know you will. Kelsey looked at her son. Find Bandit's old bowls, would you? I'm sure we kept them somewhere. He's going to need a leash and a collar too. We'll go into town and find him something. He looked at Bobbi. Do you want me to go alone? Or should we take him? Is there a pet store in Riston? Or a place where we can get him what he needs? He shook his head. We'd have to go further than Riston. Are you up for a Sunday drive? With the dog? He nodded. Sure, we can take him. Bobbi smiled at Kelsey. Thanks for letting me keep him. I promise I'll take good care of him. She hurried back out to the truck, ready to get her new baby what he needed. It was only after she was sitting in the truck that she remembered her financial situation. I can't buy him anything. I have less than $5 to my name. She was embarrassed to admit her financial situation, but he'd know soon enough. I'll get him what he needs. I'll pay you back when I get my first paycheck. Don't worry about it. She glared at him, feeling a bit stubborn. I won't let you pay for my dog. He sighed. I plan to be married to you before the end of the summer. What difference does it make if I start paying for the dog now or later? You can't just announce you're going to marry me. It doesn't work like that. Wanna bet? He pulled the truck over to the side of the road and turned toward her, cupping her face in his hands. I want to kiss you. The dog chose that moment to stick his head between theirs, making her giggle. I think Don Juan here wants my kisses more than you do. He groaned. I have a feeling I could prove you wrong about that. She giggled some more. I think he likes me. Of course he does. You've been holding him against you for a long time now. Hold me like that, and I'll like you too. Does that mean you don't like me now? She batted her eyes playfully at him. Later, I'm going to take you for a walk, and show you just how much I do like you. Oh yeah? Wilbur nodded. I'm going to marry you, Bobbi. You might as well just agree now. You can't just announce you're going to marry me. You have to woo me. You have to propose on one knee on top of a mountain. On top of a mountain? I can make that happen pretty easily, you know. I do know. Bobbi scratched the dog's ears, realizing she liked the name Don Juan for him. She liked it a lot. I can't make it too hard for you if I ever want to hear that proposal. For a moment, she daydreamed about what being married to him would be like. She'd get to keep him and his mother. They'd be her forever family, not just Don Juan. She liked the idea more than she cared to admit. He grinned, pulling the truck back out onto the road. I'll keep that in mind. You do that. She couldn't believe they were talking about marriage proposals when they'd never even kissed, but somehow it felt right. She belonged with this man, and she knew it with everything inside her. Bobbi kicked at a rock at the edge of the lake, sending it back into the depths. She missed Don Juan, but more than that, she missed the man who had courted her with pretty words and promises of tomorrow. Where had he gone? 6 kids later, he seemed so involved with everything and everyone around them. She couldn't even remember their last real date night. She missed their time together. All the while the kids had been growing up, they'd kept a weekly date night. It hadn't always happened on a Friday or Saturday night, but she understood that business owners couldn't always have the days they wanted off. Now she'd give anything if he would just agree to let her spend more time with the grandbabies. She didn't know when he'd started seeing his own needs as more important than hers, but it had definitely happened. Maybe it had been gradual. Sometimes it was hard to tell. As she walked back toward the cabin, she thought about Don Juan. She'd loved that dog with everything inside her. He'd been the first creature she'd given unconditional love to, and she'd received it back 100 times over. He'd died when the twins were small, but all her boys had memories of playing with Don Juan. Getting back into the cabin, she found Wilbur sleeping on the couch, a book on his chest, snoring uproariously. 35 years ago, she'd loved to watch him sleep. He'd meant everything to her. Now every little thing he did annoyed her. The look on his face while he slept. The sound of his snores. Even the way he stretched first thing in the morning. She sighed. She still loved him, and she knew she always would. The problem was she didn't like him much at the moment. Did that make her a bad person? She knew Kelsey would have thought so, but Kelsey had told her more than once that he was perfect when she had him. She had no idea what Bobbi had done to ruin him. The words had always made her want to strangle her mother-in-law, even though she'd loved her in a way that she wished she'd been able to love her own mother. Life was confusing. Later that night while they were eating supper, he asked, "Do you have the plans in place for our vow renewal?" Bobbi thought carefully about the words she wanted to say. She knew they would seem harsh, and that wasn't what she wanted at all. She just needed him to understand how she felt. "I'm not sure I want the vow renewal. I don't feel like we're in a good place right now." He set down his fork. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means that we've changed. It means that you used to worry about my feelings first, and you'd do anything I needed to make me happy. It means that I'm tired and I'm crabby, and I don't know if I want to even be married to you anymore, let alone celebrate 35 years together as if everything is all hunky-dory. Are you telling me you want a divorce?" His face was full of emotions, shock being at the forefront. "No. Not yet anyway. I think we need to try to work through what we're feeling though. I need to know why my feelings don't matter to you anymore. Maybe we should go to marriage counseling." He shook his head. "No. We'll work it out together like we always have." He balled up his napkin and threw it on the table. "I'm going for a walk." As he left the cabin, she felt a tear slide down her face. She stood and cleared the table, doing the dishes. Even if she was in the depths of despair, she couldn't leave a mess in the kitchen. Once a dishwasher, always a dishwasher. She went through the motions, hand-washing all the pots and pans and putting the dishes into the dishwasher. While she worked, she thought of her first real date with him, which came the Monday after they met. Bobbi looked in the mirror in the bathroom at the back of the diner, making sure her hair wasn't coming out of her ponytail. It was, so she quickly brushed it into submission. The heat from the hot dishwater made her hair flat. She wished there was time to curl it and tease it back up high like it should be, but he was due to be there any moment. As she stepped out of the bathroom, she saw him standing in front of the cafe, Don Juan on the leash he'd bought the day before. Wilber was already working his way into her heart. The boys at school had ignored her, but Wilber was pursuing her in a way that was making her head spin. He thought she was special. He'd even told her. "I'm heading out now, Kelsey." Bobbi called as she removed her apron and headed for the front door. "I may not be home for dinner." She saw that Wilber had the same picnic basket over his arm. They wouldn't be able to take ATVs with Don Juan tagging along, but a nice walk sounded good to her. As soon as she was outside, Wilber took her hand in his, as if he'd held her hand every day of their lives. Her heart skipped a beat as his skin touched hers, and she said a silent prayer that she would never get used to his touch. That every day for the rest of their lives, she would appreciate everything about him, from his ice blue eyes to his huge feet. "Can we look for Bigfoot today?" she asked softly, trying not to let her feelings show. He grinned. "I'd love to. Don Juan seems ready. Thanks for getting him for me. I'd feel guilty going on a walk without him. Do you want to look for Bigfoot or do you want me to show you around the ranch? It's a nice place to live and work." She wrinkled her brow. "If I vote for seeing the ranch, can I get a rain check on Bigfoot hunting?" He nodded. "I'll hunt for Bigfoot anytime you want. Then show me the ranch." He took her over to the stables, introducing her to the man who was in charge of the horses. "Old Bellamy has worked here forever. I can't imagine this ranch without him." "How long has it been a guest ranch?" she asked. "My grandmother didn't want to see my grandpa work himself to death, so she turned the ranch hand's house into a hotel. That's where most of the guests stay. And then she decided that it would be nice to have an RV park. My parents added a few cabins. My mom decided she wanted the diner. He pulled her past the stable to an area that she hadn't seen yet. This is what we call the Old West Town. I can see why. She stared around in surprise. Do you do anything with these buildings? He shook his head. No, they're really just here for the atmosphere. Wouldn't it be nice if the saloon was maybe an ice cream parlor? Or the apothecary shop was a first aid station? You could even turn the mercantile into a combination supply store and a grocery store for the people who stay in the RV park. He nodded. I could see that. We could have a pastor who actually performed weddings in the little church. My ancestors first lived in this area of the ranch. We brought in some of the buildings, but that little cabin there? My great-great-grandmother lived there. Legend says that she brought in a mail-order husband. I'd love to find out the real story. They stopped walking so Don Juan could sniff out just the right place to do his business. I love that you have stories like that about your family. It sometimes feels like I had no life before the day my dad killed my mother. He stared at her, shock in his eyes. Your dad shot your mother? She nodded. He killed her too. He's serving a life sentence. He's eligible for parole in 25 years. I hope he rots there. Wilbur pulled her close and kissed her forehead. I'm sorry life has been so hard for you. She shrugged. The harder life is, the stronger I am. That can't be bad. I guess not. He continued walking with her, a sad look on his face. I promise that as soon as you marry me, I won't let anything bad happen to you for the rest of your life. She laughed. You can't promise that. I can do my very best to make sure that your life is nothing but sunshine and roses after our wedding. How about next week? Bobbi laughed, shaking her head. As much as the idea appealed to her, she wanted to make sure she cared for him and not the easy life he could give her. Let's just get to know each other first. Okay? Okay. You don't know what you're missing, though. Chapter 3. When Wilbur came back to the cabin that evening, he no longer seemed angry. He was just sad. It took everything Bobbi had in her not to beg him to forgive her for her words. She'd finished the dishes and was sitting quietly reading a book Kaya had written about the first Westons who had settled at the ranch. Are you all right? She asked softly. He walked into the living room and sat in a chair perpendicular to her spot on the couch. I don't know what I am. I thought we were about to celebrate 35 years of happy marriage, and you're telling me you're not happy. I can't even figure out what to think. She closed her eyes for a moment, wanting to make him feel better, but knowing it was past time for how she'd been feeling to be out in the open. Wilbur, I'm not asking for a divorce. I'm asking you to work with me on our marriage. I feel like we've been drifting further and further apart. We're at cross purposes, and I want to feel like we're on the same team again. What's it going to take to convince you that I still love you? And that I'm willing to do what it takes to make our marriage work? She bit her lip. She wanted to say, let me stay with my grandbabies, but that wasn't fair. Yes, it was the issue that was upsetting her the most at the moment, but there was so much more involved. I'm not sure. I do know we need to communicate better. Are you willing to try? He nodded, a bit of hope entering his eyes. I know we can make things work. Don't cancel the celebration yet. I won't. The only person who knows about it is Pastor Kevin. Everything else has been kept on the down low. Everyone knows the chapel and kitchen are booked for the day, but no one knows why yet. Sounds good. Wilbur stood up and moved to sit beside his wife, putting his arm around her. Tell me about your day. Bobbi took a deep breath. Asking about her day was a good start. They'd been spending every waking moment in one another's company until they returned to the ranch. It hadn't been a question that had been asked often. I went and talked to Jacqueline for a little while. He grinned. Crazy as ever, I hope? Of course. Then I went and saw Kelsey. I got to hold Willow for a while. The girls are smiling and cooing. I just want to bring them home with me and never let them go. Of course you do. I love them too. They're beauties. When I got home, I walked down by the lake. It still calms me the way it always did. I'm glad. Wilbur leaned over and kissed her cheek. I'm going to leave you to your book. I'm tired, and I have some plans to make. What kind of plans? He shrugged. You'll see. As he left the room, she smiled. He really was a good man, even when she wanted to use an epilator on every square inch of hair on his body. She thought back to the day he'd walked her around the ranch for the first time, and they'd talked about what they would do with the old west town if they'd been running the ranch. We need to have the bakery working, too, Wilbur told her, her hand still held tightly in his. And maybe a floral shop. Wouldn't it be nice if a man wanted to propose on the ranch and he could just go get flowers from a shop? Or he could pick wildflowers. I think that's more romantic anyway. Bobbi smiled at the idea of someone picking flowers for her. So you'd rather I took my ATV up into the mountains and picked you a bouquet of flowers than I spent an arm and a leg on a dozen roses? She nodded. You can stop at the store and buy me roses anytime. You have to have forethought to go into the mountains for wildflowers. I'll keep that in mind. You're going to be different than any girl I've dated, aren't you? She frowned at the idea of him dating other women. You tell me. Am I different? He took her hand and brought it to his lips. You are very different, but in such a good way. He turned and headed a direction she hadn't been yet. She was excited to see all the aspects of her new home. She wasn't sure she'd stay for long, but so far, she couldn't imagine leaving. As they walked, he pointed out different things. This path leads to the lake. We have rafting, and it's one of the big draws for tourists. Especially in the summer. In the winter, they're here to play in the snow. She smiled. I've seen snow a few times, but never much. Southern Oklahoma isn't known for its snowstorms. He grinned. We'll go skiing, sledding, and snowmobiling. I promise you're going to love Rivers End Ranch in the winter. And the fall. And the summer. And the spring. You're just going to love the ranch, because it's so amazing. I can't wait to see it in the winter. I can just picture it with a blanket of snow covering it. I don't know if an Oklahoma girl is going to be able to handle an Idaho winter. I guess we'll see. Oh, try me. I'm tough. She stopped walking, staring in surprise at a small house along the path. Who lives there? She could see bunnies hopping along through the grass. Jacqueline. Bobbi shook her head. I'm buying her a gnome. She keeps talking about fairies, but I think gnomes are really the brains behind the operation. As soon as I get my first paycheck, that gnome is happening. What operation? How am I supposed to know what operation? She started walking again, pulling him along behind her. Suddenly she was in a huge hurry to see the lake for the first time. Do people swim in the lake? He nodded. Sure. The temperature isn't exactly warm, so you'll have to get used to it, but people swim there all summer. We're in the process of building a pool as well. That'll be up and running by the beginning of July. That sounds like fun. Why have a lake and a pool, though? Different people are looking for different things. Some people don't like swimming in a lake, because there are fish in there as well. And we'll have the pool heated, so there will be a draw to that. Some don't like to swim in pools, because they feel like the chlorine is unnatural. So we try to accommodate as many as we can on the ranch. We're building cabins for the guests to stay in right up against the lake. They will be started as soon as the pool is completed. Sounds like you're changing everything around here fast. He shrugged. It's kind of a test my parents are putting me through. Dad and I are running the ranch together for a while, but they are leaving all the major decisions to me. He guides me, and tells me if he thinks I'm making a mistake, but at the end of the day, I make the choices. They'll retire before too long, and it'll all be my responsibility. Bobbi frowned. Is that what you want? I don't really know. It's something I've always known I'd do as soon as I was old enough. That's how the ranch is run, has been for generations. So I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do and passing the test. At least I hope I'm passing. I don't get a lot of feedback from my parents. You know, I thought that it would be great to finish school and know where I was going to go and what I was going to do, but I'm not so sure now. I have my whole life in front of me. I have choices. You don't. But I have family. My family loves me, and they will guide me for as long as I need to be guided. I won't be left alone to try to figure things out. He stopped on the white sand beach in front of the water. We had the sand hauled in to make it seem more like an ocean beach. Bobbi looked around her. The mountains were just behind the lake, and she could see the river that fed into the body of water. This is beautiful. I could spend all day here just soaking up the atmosphere. What is it that's so calming about water? I have no idea. I know my mom is the same way, though. Anytime she gets stressed out or upset, Dad brings her down here or tells her to take a hot bath. I think that's why a lot of the cabins are being designed to have hot tubs on the back deck. Dad is convinced women are calmer around water. She wrinkled her nose. I don't know if I like those generalizations, but it does work for me. She squatted down to rub her hands over the dog's head and neck. How's it going, Don Juan? Do you love the water too? Don Juan let out a bark that had her laughing. I think he understands me. She glanced up and saw Wilbur watching her with a half grin on his face. What? Just thinking that you're going to be a fabulous mother. The way you are with that puppy tells me everything I need to know. She sighed. You keep trying to move faster than I can handle. I know. I'm sorry. I just don't want you to forget that I think you're very special. She stood, turning to face him. I have bad blood. What's that supposed to mean? My dad came home from work one day to find my mom talking to a man. He killed her. With that kind of violence in my family, how could you even think that I'd be worthy of marrying? Or having kids with? What if my father's violent tendencies are passed down to my kids? Our kids, and I don't believe that. What kind of family did your dad have? She shrugged. I never met his parents. I knew my mother's parents, but they wanted nothing to do with me after my mom died. They said I reminded them of him, and they were done with me. That's sad. How could they blame you for what he did? No idea. But I haven't seen them since her funeral, and I lived in the same town as them. I caught a glimpse of Grandma in the grocery store once when I was there with my foster mom, but she turned and ran out of the store. She hated me. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer. I will never hate you. It seems to me that more than anything you want a family, people who will love you forever. Am I right? She nodded. Don Juan will love me forever. He will. But so will I. You'll see. She shrugged, thinking he'd lost his mind, but not having the strength to argue at the moment. I'm getting hungry. Are you hungry? Sure. There are picnic tables over this way. He walked toward the tables, the dog trotting along behind them. I had Mom pack the picnic, so I don't even know what we have. I hope you like it. She shrugged. I'll eat it whether I like it or not. She'd had no choices in the foster homes where she'd been raised. He opened the picnic basket and pulled out 2 paper plates, napkins, and 2 cans of root beer. Root beer is kind of a ranch thing. I have a feeling my ancestors made their own, but I have no proof of this. Why do you think so then? Because the whole family has always loved root beer. How could our ancestors have been any different? Bobbi laughed at his reasoning. You're silly, you know. He nodded. I do know. I'm just glad I can make you laugh. You're too serious most of the time. How can you say that when you don't even really know me? I just know. I feel like I've been waiting my entire life for the day you walked onto this ranch. How could I not know little details about you? Bobbi took a step closer to him, leaned forward, and rested her forehead against his shoulder. No matter what happens tomorrow, I'll always treasure this moment with you. Tomorrow, I'll spend time trying to convince you we're meant to be together. And you know what I'll do the day after that? He asked. She shook her head. What will you do? The same thing. I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that we can't be whole when we're apart. You were meant for me. He put fried chicken on each of their plates and added a heaping portion of potato salad. There are brownies for dessert if you eat all your dinner. She laughed. I'll do my very best. Chocolate had always been a weakness of hers, but her foster mother had called it the devil's food, so she'd rarely had the opportunity to eat it. While they ate, Don Juan slept at their feet. She was pleased that he wasn't one of those dogs who would constantly be begging for people food. She'd give him some, of course, because she wanted to treat him, but she'd do it on her terms. After walking her back to his parents' house that evening, he cupped her face in his hands, leaning down to kiss her goodnight. I'll see you tomorrow, he told her, leaving her at the door with just a peck on the lips. She stood and watched him walk away, a hand against her lips. His kiss, well, she had nothing to compare it to, but she knew it had to be the best kiss in all of Idaho. All the world. Kissing him made her skin tingle and her toes curl. She wasn't in love, because no sane person would fall in love with someone they'd only known for 48 hours, but she sure was in like. She was very, very much in like. Bobbi looked down at the book in her hand, wondering how things had changed so very much in 35 years. Were they just taking each other for granted? Or was there more to it? She didn't know, but she was determined to find out. She wasn't willing to throw away the life she'd worked so hard to build. As she slipped into bed beside her husband, she worked hard to transform her thoughts. He was snoring, something that usually annoyed the snot out of her. She would think of his snores as his way of letting her know he was all right. All night long. Asterisk. Bobbi was up early the following morning, having agreed to run the diner for the day. The twins had a checkup, and Kelsey wasn't about to let her mother go to the doctor in her place. She quickly dressed and walked across the ranch's grounds toward the diner. Not much had changed in the place since she'd worked there 35 years before. The day after their first kiss, Wilber had come to the restaurant for lunch. She was washing dishes when his mother called her. Time for your lunch break. I'll take it in a few minutes. I want to finish this sinkful. Bobbi had always been very conscientious about her work, but with the Westons giving her a job and a place to stay, she felt like she needed to do as much as she possibly could for them. Kelsey shook her head. No, it's time for your lunch break. Bobbi wanted to continue arguing, but she knew it was no use. Mrs. Weston was very easy on her most of the time. If she wanted her to take a lunch break now instead of later, she would definitely do it. Untying her apron, she walked out front to one of the booths. As she started to sit, she heard her name called. Over here, Bobbi. Bobbi turned to see Wilber sitting at a booth, nodding to the other side. She slipped in across from him. Are you the reason I've been told that I have to take my lunch break now and not later? I can't control my mother. Do you think I can control my mother? She shook her head with a laugh. No, I would never presume to think anything like that. Good, because this was all her idea. He picked up her hand and brought it to his lips. One I wholeheartedly agree with, of course, but her idea. She tried to pull her hand away, blushing profusely. You shouldn't do that in such a public place. People will talk. They'll say, Wilber has good taste. That girl is pretty special. He nodded to her menu. Do you know what you want? She shrugged. I'll just have a cheeseburger. Onion rings or fries? Rings sound good. Here comes Mom. He ordered for both of them, asking for root beer for them each to drink. As soon as his mother turned away to put their orders in, he pulled a bouquet of wildflowers out from under the table. I got up before dawn to go up into the mountains and pick them for you. Does this mean I get brownie points? She took the flowers from him, burying her face in them. Thank you. He grinned, holding her free hand. I listened to what you said. I see that. She frowned down at the flowers. I have to put them in water so they don't die. I'll be right back. She slipped out of the booth and took them to the back of the diner, putting them in a glass of water. Truthfully, she could have waited longer to put the flowers up, but the tears in her eyes wouldn't have been possible to hide. She didn't know whether he frightened her more than he pleased her. The emotions were probably neck and neck. She was free to pursue a relationship with him, but it felt very wrong to her. But why? She put the flowers on a windowsill, where she'd be able to see them all day as she worked, before drying her tears and walking back out to the front to sit with Wilber. She kept expecting someone to jump out from behind a bush and tell her that she wasn't good enough for him. She believed it, so it wouldn't be hard to convince her. How about I come over tonight and watch a movie with you? My parents have a VCR, and they have more than 10 movies to choose from. I'm sure we could find something you haven't seen. He picked her hand up again, saying nothing about her eyes, which she knew must be red. She'd never learned to cry gracefully. What about you? Will there be a movie you haven't seen? He shook his head. I've seen them all a dozen times, but that's okay. I want to spend time with you more than I want to watch a movie. All right. But only if Don Juan can watch with us. One of the movies they have isn't Old Yeller, is it? He laughed. No, but I'm pretty sure they have the Shaggy DA. Oh, that's definitely a classic doggy movie. Yes, that's the one we'll watch. When his mother stopped by the table a minute later with their plates, he said, We're going to watch something on the VCR tonight. That's fine. I think your father is taking me to Riston for dinner anyway. He narrowed his eyes at his mother for a moment. Who's going to cook for us, then? Kelsey shrugged. Do you cook, Bobbi? I do. I don't enjoy it a lot, but I can sure do it. I'll cook for us tonight. Kelsey smiled. I think that's a fine idea. You're welcome to use anything in the fridge. Bobbi sighed. How had she been roped into cooking for him? It was only their third time to go out. Surely, he shouldn't be expecting her to cook yet. Chapter 4. Bobbi made her way back to the kitchen to make sure Bob was on task. The chef for the diner had his own ways of doing things, and he needed to be watched at times. What's the special today? Bob glanced up from his food preparation. Dirty rice and jambalaya. I hate making Cajun while Kelsey is here, because she always adds more Cajun seasoning. She makes me crazy with it. She shrugged. I know she likes things a little spicier than most people. She hasn't done that since the babies were born, has she? Oh yeah. She said the babies need to learn to tolerate hot foods if they want to be able to hold their heads up in public. I never denied she was special. She leaned on the counter, watching as Bob efficiently diced vegetables. "How's Miranda?" "She's good. And so am I because today is collage day." Bobbi stood up straight. "Collage day? How many and what kinds do you want?" She found a pen and a piece of paper. She'd go get the savory treat for all of the employees of the diner. After getting the order of everyone there, she opened the front door of the diner to head to the bakery, noting that it was just time for both of the businesses to open. She hurried past the stables, waving at Wyatt as she passed. "Mom, what's the hurry?" he called. "It's collage day at the bakery. I want 2 ham and cheese." She nodded, not breaking her stride. The collages disappeared too fast for lollygagging. She got to the bakery and saw there was already a short line out the front. When she got to the counter, she smiled at Miranda, noting that her belly was starting to grow. There was a definite baby boom there on the ranch, thanks to Jacqueline and her obsession with matchmaking. She gave her order, making casual conversation with the baker. "That's a lot of collages. Are you feeding the whole ranch?" Miranda asked, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "I'm taking Kelsey's place at the cafe for today. She has to take the babies to the pediatrician for shots, so she asked me if I'd help out. When Bob told me it was collage day, I took orders from everyone." Bobbi looked into the display case. "The cinnamon rolls look delicious today. I may need one of those to have for dessert after lunch." "Works for me." Miranda wrapped up each treat and put them into a white bakery box. "I'll see you." Bobbi waved and hurried back toward the cafe, stopping only at the stable to take Wyatt his collages. Wyatt grinned at her, taking the pastries. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't let my baby starve to death, now could I?" True to form, Wyatt shook his head and set to eating. With a wave, Bobbi hurried out the door toward the diner. She was almost there when a figure stepped out from behind a tall oak tree. She jumped with fright before she realized it was just Wilbur. "Good morning," she called, continuing her walk. He fell into step beside her. "I brought you something." She looked at him with a frown, noting the bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. For years, he'd gone the easy route and purchased flowers for special occasions. He hadn't picked wildflowers for her since the twins were born. "Oh, thank you." She shoved the bakery box at him and took the flowers, burying her nose in them. "I know just where I'm going to put them." "Oh? Not on the windowsill this time?" She laughed. "Well, I'm not on dishwashing duty today." They now had an efficient commercial dishwasher that did the job she'd once done. "I think I'm going to put them on the counter of the cafe, so I can see them every time I walk in and think about how much my husband cares for me." He followed her into the cafe, putting the bakery box on the counter. There were a few customers eating, but the employees descended on the bakery box. "It's collage day at the bakery," Bobbi told them all as she chose a water glass to put the flowers into. One of the deputy sheriffs, Seth, was there, and he groaned. "I'm going to have to hightail it over to the bakery as soon as I finish my breakfast. Sheriff will never forgive me if I don't bring him a collage. They're his favorite." "They're everyone's favorite," Bob said as he came from the kitchen to grab 2 of the pastries for himself. Seth frowned at Bob. "I think it's time you told your wife to start making them every day. This twice-a-week thing is for the birds. If she had time she'd do them every day, but they're very labor-intensive. If you want to go and volunteer your time every morning, I bet she'd make them." Bob hurried back to the kitchen with his collages in hand, knowing the other man wouldn't take him up on the plan he'd made. Bobbi looked over at Wilbur, who was watching the byplay. "Maybe it's time for us to hire another baker to help Miranda. If she can't make the food that's most in demand every morning, then we're missing out on income." He waved to his wife. "I'm going to go and get some collages and then talk to Wade." Maybe he's got some reason that I can't comprehend to explain why he hasn't hired someone to help her full time. As he left, Bobbi frowned. He was back in work mode, so she was forgotten. It was the way of things, but it wasn't something she liked. She loved the ranch every bit as much as he did, but she loved her family more. She knew he did too, but he didn't always show things the same way. As she waited tables, her mind drifted back again. Wilbur arrived just at the time he'd said he would. She added punctuality to her mental list of positive points. "I'm in the kitchen," she called when he yelled out, looking for her. She'd made a simple meal, one she'd made 1,000 times. Her foster mother had expected her to cook 3 nights a week. She'd said that every girl should know how to cook, so she'd be a proper wife. Bobbi had always doubted she'd be a wife, because she didn't think any man would want her, but she had done as she was told. She'd always strived to be the foster child who caused the least amount of trouble. Wilbur walked into the kitchen and found her serving up 2 plates of spaghetti with garlic bread. He took the plates from her hands and placed them on the kitchen table before gripping her waist and pulling her to him for a kiss. "I didn't think I'd ever get to do that again. It feels like it's been years since I've kissed you." She shook her head, ignoring the tingling in her lips. "We've known each other for 3 days, and it feels like years since you've kissed me? You have a warped sense of time, Wilber Weston." He just grinned, leaning down to pat Don Juan on the head. If she wasn't working, the puppy was at her side. "Dinner smells delicious. I hope it tastes good." Bobbi was being modest. She knew she was a good cook, but she hated doing it so much. She wished she was more like his mother, who seemed to love being in the kitchen. "I'm sure it will." He sat down, picking up his fork. "Who taught you to cook?" "My foster mother. The last one. I had 4 between the ages of 8 and 10. No one wanted the child of a murderer in their home. So they kept shoving me off to the next home." "The last one didn't mind though?" She shook her head. "She was sure she could fix me." She'd used religion as her weapon of choice, but Bobbi didn't tell him that. It was enough for him to know she'd been with the woman for 8 years. Maybe someday she'd tell him all about the places she'd lived, but for now, she didn't want him to look at her with pity or fear in his eyes. After the meal, they did the dishes together, which thrilled her. "My foster brothers were never expected to help with dishes. It was the girl's job." "Well, I think men and women should share chores equally." "Are you still going to feel that way after 30 years of marriage?" she asked, her eyes dancing merrily. "No promises, but I hope I will." They watched the Disney movie together, laughing at the antics of the man changing into a dog. Don Juan seemed to be paying attention at times, but usually he had his head resting on Bobbi's knee. She was his favorite human, after all. At the end of the night, she walked him to the door. It was strange for her, knowing she was living in his parents' house while he lived elsewhere, but that was the situation they were in. This time she reached out to him, wrapping her arms around his neck for his kiss. She found his kisses to be better than any chocolate she'd ever had, and that was saying a lot. He leaned down and brushed his lips against hers gently, and then more firmly. "I'll see you tomorrow. May I come to have lunch with you?" She nodded. "I'd like that a lot." She walked back to her small room, Don Juan following alongside her. She closed her bedroom door and turned on the radio, needing to lose herself in the music. She had always loved music, and would have liked to learn an instrument, but it cost too much for just a foster child. Of course, the birth children of her foster parents had been allowed to play anything they wanted, but it was forbidden to her. She danced to the song on the radio, feeling as if she was doing something slightly wicked. Dancing had been forbidden to her as well. As the song ended, she heard the announcer's voice. "There's been a prison break in Oklahoma. Please be on the lookout for." She didn't hear the rest, she'd frozen in place. Her father had tried to write letters to her over the years, but she'd returned them all unopened. She walked into the bathroom and stood under the shower spray, allowing the water to wash over her, not realizing until she was getting out that she'd forgotten to remove her clothes. Silently, Bobbi prayed, "Please, God, don't let it be my father who has escaped. I couldn't bear to see him." Bobbi shook her head, refusing to think about her father. He'd been in prison for more than 40 years, and she needed to forget him. She slid 2 specials onto a table in front of 2 men she didn't know. "If you need anything else, be sure to let me know. My name is Bobbi." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, pestering Bob for her next order. Keeping her mind off her father was always best. He was due to be out soon, she knew. She couldn't remember exactly when. As she was finishing up her shift, she spotted Danny walking toward her. "Mom, you have a letter." Bobbi took the letter and slipped it into her pocket, knowing that time with her older daughter was more important than any letter that could be found. "How's my girl?" Danny pushed her hair out of her eyes. "I'm good. Happy. You did the right thing sending Travis to me. He's the perfect husband for me. I'm glad. I heard something about the 2 of you racing 4-wheelers through the mountain paths. Is that true?" Danny laughed. "I can neither confirm nor deny this rumor. Just be careful. I only have 2 daughters, and I don't want to lose one of them. But if I was Wyatt? I don't want to lose him. He's good with the horses. Maybe Will." Danny shook her head. "Your heart would break into a million pieces if you lost any of us, and you know it." "Of course it would. Just don't tell your brothers that, would you?" "Too late, Mom. We already know how much you love us. You wouldn't be so hard on us otherwise." Bobbi smiled at that. "That's all your father. I'm just the unfortunate messenger at times." She leaned toward Danny, ready to impart a secret. She didn't know why she felt the need to tell her anything, but she was feeling very nostalgic. "Your father was forced to jump through hoops to see if he was ready to take over the ranch 35 years ago. His tests lasted 3 years, if I remember correctly. He hated it as much as you and your brothers and sister do." "Really?" Danny asked, obviously surprised. "Really. Whose turn is it to cook this Sunday?" "Kelsey's." "Are you coming?" "It's a family dinner." "Why wouldn't I come? Am I not family?" "Well, you don't always, so I was just wondering." Bobbi grinned, hugging her daughter. "We'll be there. Tell Kelsey to chop up a few more jalapeno peppers." As Danny ran off, Bobbi dug the letter out of her pocket, frowning when she saw the familiar address. It was from the prison. Again. Tucking it back into her pocket, she walked the rest of the way to the cabin she was sharing with Wilbur. When she walked in, she saw 4 different vases around the room, each filled with wildflowers, and a smile tilted her lips. Her husband was courting her, and she liked it. More than she probably should. She walked to the couch and sat down, removing the letter from her pocket again. She knew she should read it. She'd refused every letter for 43 years. It was time she read something he sent her. She slid her finger under the flap of the envelope and took out the single sheet of paper. She didn't want to read it, and she almost put it back in unread, but it was time. "Dear Roberta, I have written you more times than I can count over the years, hoping you will forgive me. Your mother is the only woman I have ever loved, and what I did was inexcusable. I had been drinking, but that's no reason for my behavior. I miss you every day, and I hope you'll agree to see me when I get out of prison at the end of the month. It would mean the world to me. I know you have 6 children, because I keep up with your life as best I can using the prison library. I would like to meet my grandchildren. Please let me be a part of your life. Your father." Bobbi shuddered, stuffing the letter back into the envelope. Of course, she wasn't going to let a murderer be around her children. She'd done everything she could to protect them over the years, and she wasn't going to invite him into her home. She sat staring into space, thinking about the prison break all those years ago. It hadn't taken long for the police to find her and interview her. She had used her social security number when she'd started working for the ranch, after all. The previous sheriff had been nothing like her son-in-law, Shane Clapper. He'd been an older man with a beer belly who'd looked at her as if she was guilty when he'd walked into the diner to talk to her. "Are you Bobbi Jackson? Daughter of Reginald Jackson?" Bobbi nodded. "I am. Could we talk about this in private, please?" She knew they were there about her father escaping, and she knew she was innocent of any wrongdoing. So why was she shaking so badly? The sheriff, Steve Jameson, had led her outside to stand beside the cafe. She knew the customers and other employees were watching her, but she was powerless to do anything about it. "How can I help you, Sheriff? Are you aware that your father has escaped from a maximum security prison in Oklahoma?" Bobbi shook her head. "I haven't seen or spoken to my father since before his trial. I was taken from him as soon as it was determined that he'd murdered my mother." "Are you saying your father has never written to you? In 10 years? She took a deep breath. "He's written to me repeatedly. I have returned the letters unopened. Why would I want to talk to the man who murdered my mother? Why could people not understand why she wouldn't have anything to do with the man? So he hasn't come to see you since his escape?" She shook her head. "No, sir, he hasn't. As far as I know, he thinks I'm still in Oklahoma. I came here to lose the stigma of being the girl whose father was a murderer. I want nothing to do with him. Do you have any idea where your father would go?" She shook her head. "None. What did he like to do before his incarceration?" "I was 8 years old the last time I saw him. I remember he liked to drink, play pool, and he liked to push me on the swing in our backyard." As she said the words, her heart ached. As long as she could think of him as the man who'd killed her mother, she was fine. When she had to think of him as her daddy, it hurt beyond belief. "Do you know which bar he liked to drink at?" "No, sir. I have no idea." "Which pool hall he frequented?" Bobbi shook her head. "I really don't remember at all." "Will you get in touch with the sheriff's department if he contacts you?" "Yes, of course I will." The sheriff had shaken her hand and walked away, leaving her standing there, with everyone watching out the window of the cafe. She wanted to pack her things and leave right there and then, but she couldn't. She had already become attached to Kelsey Weston, and her feelings for Wilber were stronger than she'd imagined possible after a 4-day acquaintance. So instead of going to the house where she was staying to pack her things, she walked right toward the front door of the cafe, ignored all the people gaping at her, and walked back to the kitchen to work on the dishes. Kelsey had come to the back and put her hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Bobbi nodded, the tears stinging her eyes. If Kelsey had been accusatory, she would have been able to hold up so much easier, but there was sympathy in the older woman's voice. "I'm fine. My father escaped from prison, so they're questioning me. They want me to let them know if he tries to contact me." "Has he?" Bobbi shook her head. "No, not since I've been here. He sent me letters every week when I was in Oklahoma." "What did he say in them?" "No idea. I sent them all back unopened. I had no desire to hear from him." Kelsey studied her for a moment. "I'm here if you need to talk. God never blessed me with a daughter, but I've come to think of you as one." Bobbi stared at the older woman with surprise on her face. "In 4 days? My foster mother had me for 8 years, and I was never more than a burden to her." "Yes, in 4 days. You're a remarkable young lady. Anyone else would have run, but you came back in here and got right back to work." "I thought about running," Bobbi whispered. "Why didn't you?" Kelsey asked. Because I feel like I'm part of a family for the first time in 10 years. I can't leave. Bobbi turned to Kelsey and buried her face in the older woman's shoulder, the tears soaking Kelsey's shirt. You are a part of our family now. We want you to stay forever, whether you continue to have a relationship with Wilber or not. Bobbi brushed the tears from her eyes as she looked down at the letter in her hand. How could he want to come back into her life after all this time? It had been 45 years since she'd seen him. How could he think she'd want anything to do with him? Wilber walked into the house to see her crying on the sofa, and she handed him the letter, saying nothing. She didn't need to. After 35 years of marriage, he knew how she felt about her father, though they'd seldom discussed him over the years. It was a subject she didn't talk about. Chapter 5. Wilber spent the entire day trying to think of ways he could show his wife that she was still the woman he loved beyond words or his wildest imagination. He went into town and found her a necklace that he knew she'd been eyeing, and he'd stopped to get dinner because she'd worked in the cafe all day. He knew she hated to cook anyway. He opened the door to the cabin, expecting to arrive just before Bobbi did, and instead found her sitting on the couch, her head in her hands, sobbing. He set the Chinese takeout on the counter and rushed over to the couch, sitting beside her and gathering her close. What is it? Bobbi couldn't speak, so she simply handed him the letter. Wilber felt a ball of pain forming in his throat. What do you want to do? He remembered the day all those years ago when her father had escaped from prison. It hadn't been pretty. His mother had sent her home from work early, telling her to take a nap. Then she'd found someone to track him down where he was working with his father. He'd been with his father on horseback, scouting out a place for a new ski lift to be put in, when he received a note from his mother. As soon as he read the note, he panicked. I need to go talk to Bobbi. His father frowned. This ranch is your first love. Not some girl who came in on the latest bus and could leave any minute. Wilbur's eyes had met his father's. I've always known this ranch was my future, but I'll tell you now that she's more important to me than this land. She's been the most important thing in my life since I laid eyes on her. If you can't understand that, I'm not the man to run this ranch for you. With that he pulled the reins of his horse to one side and started down the mountain. By the time he'd gotten to the house, his heart was in his throat. He rushed through the house, calling her name. When he got to her bedroom door, he knocked, though he wanted to just rush in and hold her. She needed him, and he'd been off working. She came first, and she always would. He had to show her that. Come in. Her voice was soft, and he could tell she'd been crying. He opened the door and walked in. She was lying on her stomach on the bed, sobbing uncontrollably. He sat on the bed beside her, his hand stroking her back and her hair, which had come out of the ponytail she wore for work. Mom sent me a message that you needed me. Are you all right? She sat up, shaking her head. I think I need to move on. I can't stay here, suspected by the police. I've done nothing wrong. And that's exactly why you will stay here. You've done nothing, and you need to be with people who know that. People who care about you. She leaned into him, and he let his arms close around her. He didn't let himself worry about the situation they were in, alone, on her bed, but just tried to take the pain away. I don't want your parents to run into trouble, she finally said, swiping the tears off her face. They've been so kind to me. Running will do nothing good. I'd have to go with you, and then my parents would have to find another son to run the ranch. She laughed softly. You can't go with me. Your whole life is here. He cupped her face in his hands. I don't think you understand. My whole life is you. What if he comes here looking for me? He cocked his head to one side, studying her face. Are you worried he'll hurt you? She shook her head adamantly. No. Not at all. He's never hurt me in any way. Then what would it hurt to stay here? Surely you've had contact with him over the years. I haven't. Not at all. He wrote me every week while I was still in my foster home, but I returned all letters unopened. He frowned. Why do you think he's broken out, then? She shrugged. Why does anyone break out of prison? He doesn't look good in orange, and it's not where he wants to be? I've heard it's not exactly a vacation. You don't think there's more to it than that? Like what? Maybe he's worried about you. Is that possible? He doesn't know where you are, now that you're not in a foster home anymore. He could be looking for you to make sure you're all right. I guess. Are you sure he killed your mother? She slowly nodded. I was in my bedroom. Mom was in the living room talking to the pastor. He was a new pastor, and Dad never went to church, so he didn't know him. When Dad got home, he was drunk, and he went for the pastor's throat. Mom tried to stop him and he backhanded her, sending her flying into the wall. She fell and hit her head. Taking a deep breath, she said, the pastor testified against him, and he confessed. They called it second-degree murder. He pursed his lips. Sounds like it's more manslaughter, but that's neither here nor there. Do you have any desire to see him? The tears started flowing again. She had visions of him picking her up and swinging her around. Of him pushing her on the swing and calling her Bobbi. No. He killed my mother. All right. What do you want to do? What do you mean? What can I do? Do you want to go? Because I can pack what I need and be ready within the hour. Or are you going to stay here and stick it out? Here, where you have a family. She sniffled. A forever family? That's what I've wanted since the day my mom died. A forever family. If you want us forever, then you'll have us. Mom has decided you're the daughter she always wanted, and it has nothing to do with your relationship with me. She's keeping you. Bobbi smiled a little, but the tears were still flowing. I'm going to stay here. If he finds me, he won't hurt me. I know he won't. He pulled her close, her head coming to rest on his shoulder. I'm glad. I didn't want to leave. Thank you. Wilbur shook his head and realized where he was as he frowned down at the letter in his hands. How do you want to handle it? He knew she'd gotten hundreds of letters over the years, but to his knowledge, this was the first one she'd opened. She shrugged. I really have no idea. It's been 45 years since I've seen him. 35 since I've heard his voice. I don't know what to think or feel. It's like I'm the confused little girl who lost her mother all over again. But you're not. You're a successful woman who has raised 6 pretty darned awesome kids, 7 including Jess. You're strong and competent. He can't take that away from you. She sniffled again. I'm just so torn. Am I being unforgiving? He is my father. How am I supposed to forgive him, though? Our kids never knew their grandmother. Well, they knew their grandma Kelsey, who was pretty awesome, but not my mom. He's also in his 70s. He's alone in the world with no one. And I won't speak to him? His own flesh and blood? Maybe we should ask the kids if they want to meet him. Are we going to the family dinner on Sunday? That would be a good place to bring it up. She sighed. They all know. But it's one thing to know your grandfather killed your grandmother and another to come face to face with said grandfather. I just don't know the right thing to do. And Kelsey has those 2 precious babies. Can I let him be around them? Wilbur shrugged. If you meet him with our boys around, there would be no danger. We have 4 strong sons. 2 strong sons-in-law. Jake would be there. Nothing would happen to you or those babies. Nothing. She tilted her head to the side and thought about it for a moment. That's true. And we can ask Shane to bring his gun and his deputies if we're that worried about it. You could invite him to come to our 35th anniversary celebration and vow renewal. She frowned at him. You know that hasn't been decided yet. It's about to be. Wait till you see what I brought you. He kissed her forehead. Close your eyes. Bobbi laughed even as she obeyed. Her husband had spent more than half of her life bringing her surprises. How could she stay mad at him? A moment later, he picked up her hand and put something warm in it. She looked down and laughed. Chinese takeout. How did you know I wasn't going to be up to cooking tonight? I know my wife. He took the necklace box and laid it on the couch beside her. You don't get the surprise until you eat all your supper. She grinned, remembering what he'd said to her at their first picnic. All we need is Don Juan here to make things perfect. I haven't thought about Don Juan in forever. What made you think of him? She shrugged. I've been thinking a lot about my first days on the ranch lately. I miss your mom and Don Juan the most. He nodded. I miss them both too. Kelsey seems to be just like her other than the eyes. Yeah, she does. As they ate, Bobbi kept looking at the letter, which was lying on the coffee table. I'm not sure I should have read that letter. I think you're wrong. You did the right thing. She bit her lip. Maybe. I do think I'm going to talk to the kids about it on Sunday. I think they should have a say in what we decide. Promise me the final decision will still be yours. It will be. They don't know him, and I do. She frowned. Well, I did. The following morning, Bobbi decided she needed to make another trip over to see Jacqueline. Maybe she could talk out what had happened with the older woman and let her give an opinion. She already knew, so why not? As she walked, she thought about her first visit to the little house at the edge of the RV camp. She'd been given Wednesday off, because Kelsey thought she needed time to think about what was going on with her father. First thing that morning, a letter had been hand-delivered to her as she ate breakfast. Dear Miss Jackson, I would like to request the honor of your presence for tea and snickerdoodles this afternoon. The fairies would like to get a closer look at you. Please arrive at 2. Thank you. Jacqueline Hardy. She was nervous about seeing the crazy woman, but Kelsey assured her she'd be fine. Even Wilbur had told her that she'd been an honorary aunt to him his entire life. She refused to be frightened. As she wandered through the gate and into the yard with the bunnies hopping everywhere, Jacqueline stepped onto her porch, her hand over her eyes. It's about time. The fairies are getting antsy. Do you always talk to fairies, Miss Hardy? Oh, call me Jacqueline. Miss Hardy makes me seem like an old woman sitting on a porch and knitting shawls for my bunnies. And no, I don't always talk to fairies. In fact, they just started talking to me a few days before you arrived. They told me you were coming, and that you'd be in need of my help. So? How can I help you? I don't know. I came only because of your invitation. Well, then it sounds like the fairies need to be more forthcoming. Bobbi looked down at the paper bag she held in her hands. She'd almost forgotten, and that wouldn't be right after begging Wilbur to take her on an errand in town during his lunch hour. I brought you something. Jacqueline put her hand over her chest in surprise. You did? Well, I don't have anything for you. That's all right. Bobbi felt like she was on firmer ground now, and she was so glad she'd gotten the gift. It had taken all the tips she'd earned from the few tables she'd waited while the waitresses were on break, but that was all right. It was something special, and she knew it would suit Jacqueline perfectly. Well, come in and I'll open it while I'm sitting. That will be better, right? Bobbi had no answer for that, so she walked into the house, looking around for a place to sit. Exactly how many bunnies do you have? Only 12. I had 4, but You know how bunnies are. Just scoop one up and you can hold it or set it on the floor. Bobbi was suddenly glad she'd decided to leave Don Juan at home. He would have loved the walk, but he would have wanted to chase the bunnies. It would have been a fun new game for him, but she was certain Jacqueline wouldn't approve. She scooped a bunny out of the chair and planted her bottom in it, stroking the bunny's head. Jacqueline opened the paper sack and squealed with surprise. It's a gnome. For my yard? He's perfect. I shall call him George, and he shall reign over the fairies with an iron fist. She leaned toward the gnome as if she was listening. What's that? The gnomes and the fairies are natural enemies? Life is about to get interesting around here, I see. I'm sorry I didn't wrap it. There was no time. It's perfect. George isn't one who needs frou-frou wrapping paper. He's content just the way he is. Jacqueline sighed happily. I can't wait to put him in my yard. Maybe I'll start an entire gnome village. I think that would be very wise, Bobbi said, struggling to keep her face straight. So you really don't know why the fairies wanted me to help you? Nothing bad is going on in your life? Jacqueline's eyes narrowed at Bobbi, obviously thinking she was holding something back from her. Bobbi bit her lip, wondering how much she should tell the older woman. Finally, she decided to spill it all. Why not? The whole ranch would soon know that her father was an escaped con. She spilled the story quickly and emotionlessly. She didn't want Jacqueline to realize just how upset she was over the whole thing. So, has your father called you? Bobbi shook her head. Not yet. I think he will, though. How do you feel about seeing him? I don't know. As my father, I want to see him, of course. As my mother's murderer, it's harder to want to see him. Bobbi raised her hands, as if confused. I'm not sure that's why the fairies wanted you to come over. I think you're here to talk about your feelings for Wilbur. Wilbur? Bobbi blushed profusely. What exactly am I supposed to say? How could she admit feelings she had to this woman when she hadn't even admitted them to herself? How do you feel? I know he saw you and knew he'd marry you, but how do you feel about him? Jacqueline leaned forward, studying her face. Bobbi took a deep breath. He's a very kind man, and I like him a great deal. Enough to marry him? Having known him for precisely 5 days, that's hard to answer. Maybe once I've known him for a week, I'll have a better handle on my feelings. Even Bobbi was surprised by the sarcasm that dripped from her words. Her foster mother had been determined to make certain she never used that tone of voice again. I'm sorry. That was rude. Jacqueline simply laughed. Not rude at all. When you've only known a man for a week and people keep bugging you about your feelings for him, sarcasm is definitely called for. I approve. Bobbi smiled. I'm glad you do. She shrugged. I like him a lot. I've never had a boyfriend before, and he's a very sweet man to be my first. And last. I think the fairies are pushing for the two of you to marry. They approve of you together. Did they tell you that? Bobbi asked. Honestly, the fairies talking to me is very new. They told me that you were about to come to the ranch and that you would marry Wilbur. They said the two of you are destined to be together, but you would perceive obstacles before you that you didn't need to worry about. So stop worrying about them. I can't marry a man while my father is on the loose. It wouldn't feel right. Bobbi knew she was looking for reasons not to marry quite yet. As much as she cared about Wilbur, it didn't feel like it was time. Would it feel wrong, though? Jacqueline asked. I don't know. Maybe. Bobbi felt as if Jacqueline's role in life was to confuse her. Jacqueline cocked her head to one side. The fairies say he'll be back in prison tomorrow. Will that make you feel better about everything? My father being in prison doesn't make me feel good. How could it? I guess that makes sense. Jacqueline looked down. Oh, I forgot to offer you tea and snickerdoodles. Do you like snickerdoodles? They're the only cookie I bake, but I bake them like a champ. I think so. I don't remember ever having them. There had been few treats in Bobbi's life for the past 10 years. Well, try one. Jacqueline peered at her anxiously, making Bobbi feel a bit like a bug in a glass jar. Bobbi took a small plate and added one of the cookies to it, also pouring herself a cup of the tea. She took a bite of the cookie and closed her eyes, smiling big. They're delicious. Jacqueline sat back happily. I told the fairies that snickerdoodles would be good and you didn't need chocolate chip. They were very fussy about it though. Do fairies talk to people everywhere you go? If they do, no one has ever mentioned it to me before. Do you think they'll stop talking to you? Or will they continue? Bobbi didn't believe in fairies, but it was so fun to play along with the game the older woman was playing. Surely it wouldn't hurt anything for her to pretend fairies were real. Oh, I think now that they've opened their big mouths, they'll never be able to close them. I don't mind though. It's kind of nice to have the company. Bobbi shook her head, stopping in front of the house. Over the years, she and Jacqueline had become very close, and she'd grown used to the fairy talk. She'd even spent hours consoling Jacqueline over the death of George. Sure enough, as she walked up to the house, Jacqueline stuck her head out. The fairy said you were coming. I have tea and snickerdoodles. Though the fairies still insist I should be baking chocolate chip cookies for you. The fairies are silly. Bobbi didn't wait for an invitation into the house, knowing she was welcome. They'd been friends for too long for her to suspect anything else at all. Once she was inside, Bobbi shooed a couple of bunnies from her favorite chair, determined that she would not have to deal with them. As much as she loved bunnies, what she wanted to talk about was serious, and not meant to be filled with animals. She waited while Jacqueline set everything just so and poured her a cup of tea. I thought you needed something special today, so I made chamomile. Jacqueline flinched. Okay. The fairies insisted on chamomile. Chamomile is perfect, Bobbi said, accepting the cup. And as much as I love your snickerdoodles, the fairies were right about the cookies. I need all the chocolate I can get my hands on at the moment. Jacqueline studied her over the rim of her own cup. Tell me everything.